So you're committing a misdemeanor, and then he's committing like a class A felony of like first degree basically, and then you're defending yourself against that. I think that we're at such a disparate level of crime here, and I could probably imagine some crimes that you could commit with a weapon where you could defend yourself. So, for instance, clipping somebody's yard, like you walk through somebody's yard, that is trespassing, right? And if the second you did it, like Usain Bolt, okay, the fastest runner in the world, runs out of the house to go and beat the you because you clipped his yard, you crossed through it, and then you have a knife and you defend yourself. Like in that case, would I say that like, well, you lost the right to self-defense the second you step through his yard? I would say probably not. I would say that if you're committing, almost for certain every felony, if you're committing crimes where you expect to meet any type of resistance and you have a weapon with you, I would say that that weapon is automatically being used to further the crime because you have it there to help you basically commit the crime, right? Like, would we imagine ever that you're committing the crime, somebody comes out to stop you, and then you use the weapon to defend yourself, but then you're like, okay, I'm not going to commit the original crime anymore, I'm just going to leave? Like somebody breaks in, and then, they've got like a ton of your money, and then you come down the stairs, and you're like, wait, and then you pull out a baseball bat, and the guy's like, hold on, and then he pulls out a gun. He's like, now listen, you got the bat, I got the gun, I'm going to leave your money now, but I'm just going to leave, right? No, they would use the weapon to finish committing the crime.
But I don't think that that's really germane to what we're talking about, because what you just admitted was you could envision a scenario where someone is committing a crime such as trespassing that is armed, but they would still, in some sort of hypothetical, have a reasonable case for self-defense, which would mean that the mere act of having the weapon in the first place while going to commit that crime wasn't a premeditated use of violence, because a reasonable person could say, well, I'm not going to use this weapon to commit this act of violence, to commit this crime. However, I'll keep it on me just in case things escalate to where I need to defend my life, because that stuff does happen. I could be being attacked in a way that I find to be unreasonable, that I fear for my life for the petty crime that I was committing, such as the George Floyd situation that he gave. And so therefore you could imagine why he would have a knife on him, even though he didn't intend to use that knife in the commission of his crime of passing a fake bill.
Sure, but that's why I said before, and I said at the start, at the head of this, that I don't think you would necessarily automatically concede your right to self-defense, but I think that any crime that you commit where there's like a reasonable understanding that another person is going to try to stop you, if you have a weapon, I would say you automatically intend to use that weapon to further the crime. You're never surrendering. You're never getting beaten up without using your weapon, and you're probably never stopping the crime unless you literally can't carry it out anymore. So, like, you're always bringing that weapon in the commission of the crime. 100%, you are. You're never giving up. You're never, like, a guy doesn't go to a house with a gun for self-defense, and then the owner comes downstairs with a bat, and the guy just runs away, or the owner beats him up, and the guy like hobbles away. He's got his gun to defend himself, and that gun is to defend himself while he's in the commission of a crime.
That's fine, but that's different. And we could even say that should be illegal. He should, most cases, lose his right to self-defense because, as I've already admitted, I support things like Castle Doctrine. Well, in general, I don't know specifically how it's worded or applied, but I do support people's right to defend their property using lethal means if necessary. I think that's something I support. All I'm saying is there is a difference between saying if you have a weapon and you go to commit a crime, that's tantamount to premeditation that you were going to use violence to commit that crime. I think those are two separate things. And the second thing is what I'm saying is required in my definition of insurrection, that you had to have premeditated wanting to use violence in your attempt to overthrow the government. It's not enough to say, but I will have...
Well, sure, wait, don't worry about the insurrection. Okay, wait, here's a question. How would you, in your world, we agree that there's first-degree murder usually requires you've thought about it, you've premeditated it, and you have an intention to kill the person, right? We agree that for first-degree murder. In your world,
I think so, yeah.
Okay. There's that. We're gonna say second-degree murder is you've engaged in action that you know is going to kill somebody. Okay, maybe there wasn't that a large premeditation element, but you've engaged in an action that you know is going to kill somebody. And then manslaughter is maybe you've acted with reckless disregard towards human life, doing something that you know could have killed somebody, basically, right? I'm giving these as broad. Every state will define these a little bit differently.
Sure, yeah.
In your world,
I agree with you in general.
Sure.
Yeah.
In your world, how would you ever convict somebody of second-degree murder ever? It seems like there would only ever be first-degree murder or manslaughter, that there would never be a second-degree murder ever, because you could never...
Well, why? You already said people prove mens rea all the time. People prove intent all the time.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying here that everything that you've given me so far, I don't think any court would agree with anything you've laid out so far. So I'm trying to figure out, like, in your world, how would you ever prove, like, a second-degree murder It feels like in
give
Rob's
me-
world, it would always be a manslaughter because a person, well, he wasn't planning on using violence. It just kind of ended up happening as a result of some situation. But if he like had a whole plan to do it or whatever, it would just be first degree murder. Like I don't know how you would ever get.
Let me restate what I think you're saying about second degree murder to make sure that I'm
Sure.
not getting confused. First degree murder is I plan to kill that person. I take a weapon or not, whatever, how I'm going to kill them. I show up, I kill them. It was premeditated. That's first degree. You're saying second degree murder would be I'm planning to commit some sort of crime, but that doesn't rise to the level of murder, which predictably could escalate. And then when I commit that crime and it escalates and I kill that person, that's second degree murder.
I guess I could be, yeah, if you kill them during the commission of some crime or.
So I'm going to break into your house and steal all of your possessions, and you wake up and you come at me and I shoot you. That's second degree murder, not first degree murder, because I didn't premeditate to kill you, but I was committing a felony and then killed you in cold blood in the heat of the moment when you came. That would be second degree murder?
Fuck. Actually, on that one, I don't know if that would be second degree or first. I'm not sure if that would be. That might actually be first degree murder. I'm not even sure on that.
I guess
one.
I'm just confused. I understand the difference between first degree and manslaughter, and like you said, I know each state defines these differently. But what are you? Can you just, as clear as possible, identify what you mean by second degree murder? How it's differentiated between manslaughter and first degree murder?
So I think that so for second degree murder, let's say that you're. It would be if you're. It would be something that could come up like spontaneously, but you're doing something with the intention to kill somebody that you know will kill them. So I think the difference between first and second degree might be like first degree murder is I'm talking to my wife. I find out that she, fucked 20 people at this bar. And I'm like, okay, well, fuck, I'm going to go to this bar and do a mass shooting, okay? You go to the bar, you bring an assault rifle, you got it fully loaded. You go to the bar, you start shooting, killing everybody, okay? This is first degree murder, right? You went in with you knew you were going to do this. You intended to kill them all. You know you're committing lethal force, right? And then second degree murder, like let's say that you're at a bar and then you find out that some guy is saying something like, "Oh yeah, like last night I came in your soup and you didn't even realize it." And you're like, "The fuck, you what?" And then you reach down. Let's say that you reach down and you. Let's say somebody says that to you. You reach over, you grab a knife, and you stab them in the neck like 10 times or whatever. You're so fucking pissed off. That might be second degree murder. Let's say that somebody says the same thing to you. Okay, I came in your Fruit Loops, 20 times this morning when you weren't watching, and you're like, what? And you punch this guy, like 5 times in the face, and he ends up dying, right? So I think the first case, when you go in and you shoot everybody because you find out, your wife fucked everybody in the bar, okay, you shoot them all and kill them all, that's first degree murder. The guy tells you something about, coming in your Fruit Loops, you stab him 20 times in the neck. I think that would be second degree murder because you're engaging in an action that you know is going to kill somebody. And then I think the third one where you punch somebody like 5 times right in the nose, you punch him even when he goes down to the ground, you're so fucking mad. I think that might be like first degree manslaughter or voluntary manslaughter because you didn't really know it was going to kill him, but you're acting with such reckless disregard and you know that you should know this, you could kill him, right? But it wasn't the same as like the second degree where you're intending to kill the guy. And for the first degree, it lacked that the deliberative element, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so then I think you answered the question. So then your question then becomes, how would there ever be a case for second degree murder? Well, you gave the argument. The difference is the premeditation. First degree murder is you hear something, you're premeditating, okay, I'm going to show up and I'm going to kill someone, and you act that out. That's premeditation, first degree murder in the example you're giving. Second degree murder is more of the heat of the moment. You're taking an action that you know will most likely result in the death of someone, like you shoot them, but it was a heat of the moment type thing. Manslaughter would be do something in the heat of the moment that you didn't necessarily know would result in death, like you punch them in the temple.
Yeah, but here's my issue. The thing that I'm doing is I'm kind of transferring the intent, the first degree intent, from the crime to the murder. So, for instance, if you would have that premeditated element if you were committing a crime. And if you brought a weapon with you and something during that crime happened where there was a back and forth and you end up killing a person, it's like, well, bro, you went to commit a crime where you knew the guy could oppose you with violent means and you brought a weapon. Of course, you're basically planning on killing a guy if he stops you from committing a crime. That's why I'm saying that the plan to use violence would be there if you're committing a crime and you have a weapon on you from the start and it's a crime where you know that you're expecting to meet some kind of resistance.
I don't know. I don't know how that plays out in the legal field. Again, I'm not talking about my definition, particularly in the legalese of it, but my guess is there are an awful lot of times where people get charged for second degree murder in that very example that you just gave, such as you're in a gang and you're armed all the time and you show up to rob a rival gang. And then in the commission of that robbery, violence breaks out and you pull your gun and you shoot. That's, I'm guessing more often than not, going to be charged as second degree murder. Would be my guess. I could be wrong about that, but
well, I think that might actually fall under felony murder. If you're doing a robbery that involves violence, and if you had a weapon on you and somebody dies or you kill somebody or something happens during it, I think that would de jure be like felony murder there, because the law system has decided, well, listen, you're going to commit a crime where somebody, it's reasonable to expect during certain, I think these are only for like class, it depends on the state, but like high level felonies, there's going to be violence here, and then you bring a weapon and somebody dies, I think you would just get a felony murder charge there. And I believe felony murder, at least I'm looking here for, is this Florida law? Felony murder might be treated the same as first degree murder, at least in the state of Florida.
I don't know. It might be true. I'm telling you right now that I'm not a lawyer, and I haven't looked into the difference between first degree and second degree. I'm saying that one of those is premeditated and the other isn't. Like saying I'm planning. You acknowledge that there's a difference. Saying we're going to go. No,
I don't. To be clear, I don't that much. No.
I completely disagree. I think that there's a difference saying we're going to show up and shoot John and steal his drugs versus, hey, get your weapons in case John fights back, but we're going to go steal his drugs, but we're not planning to kill him. I think those are two different things. One is clear premeditation. The other, premeditation to commit violence. The other is not. And again, like, we're spending a lot of time on this, which is fine, but I don't know how germane it is because, again...
Okay, well, to be meta, we're spending a lot of time on this because I don't know if I believe you think this or if you're really just trying to head off, if you feel like this is like a linchpin to the J6 argument.
No,
in any circumstance, if somebody showed up to your house with firearms and their goal was to break in and steal like some family heirloom or some shit, and you caught them and you resisted and then they shot and killed you, I would 100% say, you guys this is what the fuck. You were planning on, if you showed up to do this, you were going to kill him the whole fucking time. Like, you brought a gun to this crime. Like, you're planning, it's going to get violent if he catches you. Yeah, this is basically you planning on killing the dude.
No, I disagree. I would say that that's different.
Or at the very least, you're planning on using violence to commit the crime.
Well, I think... I don't know. Like, it would depend on the situation. For example, if I planned on going into the house that I knew people were there, that changes the different. That changes what I would think about it versus I assume that everyone would be out of the house. Like, they're on vacation, so I plan my burglary attempt then, but I'm armed just in case the watchman shows up or someone comes while I'm doing it. I think in the first scenario, there seems to be more propensity to understand that violence is likely to occur versus the second scenario, which is that I seem to be taking steps to avoid violence, but I do protect myself by having a weapon or something. But again, to get it back, I understand you don't want to do this, but try to bring it back to what we're talking about with insurrection. I think that I'm being legitimate and good faith in what I'm determining to be what is commonly understood when we talk about the term insurrection, because I think that almost no one was calling the actions of many of the Black Lives Matter, including the initial Minneapolis situation, an insurrection. I didn't call it that. I don't know anyone that did, because I think that the common vernacular when we're using that term is that we assume that it means sort of the things that I'm saying. That it's like people planning to use violence in an attempt to overthrow the government.
Okay, like, just curious then. So would you say then, okay, sorry, we'll move on from this in a second. We can't agree, I guess, and we'll just mark this as a disagreement. But I think this is probably going to come up in the future. Even in my definition, this might come up in the future. Does this mean that you would never ever say that violence was pre-planned unless the planned crime itself included violence then? So for instance, if I were to plan to do assault with a deadly weapon or to murder somebody with a deadly weapon, those we would both agree, those obviously include a plan of violence, correct?
Sure, yes.
But if we plan to do every single other crime, as long as the plan didn't include violence, then we would never say that violence was part of the plan. So I could plan a break-in and entry, I could plan a rape or sexual assault, I could plan to beat somebody up with my hands, with my fists, I could plan to steal every single dollar a person owns, I could plan to steal a person's car, I could plan to set their house, I could plan to do all these things, but none of those plans, even if we brought a gun to every single one, you would never say any of those plans include like violence with a deadly weapon. None of those plans include it, even if I bring a weapon to commit all of those crimes.
I mean... this is difficult because the examples you give range from clear acts of violence like rape versus stealing money. So like so then the definition changes to violence with a deadly weapon. I don't know. I think if you're committing a rape and you have a knife on that's clearly visible and being brandished.
Well, wait, no, it doesn't have to be visible brandished. Don't add to it. What if you have a knife in your pocket? Sure, okay.
I would say in that definition, because you're already committing, it seems to not matter at that point because we're talking about whether or not violence was being intended. You're clearly intending to commit violence if you're raping someone. Would I say that it's violence?
But you wouldn't say you're
sure.
You wouldn't say you're clearly intending violence if you're breaking into somebody's house and stealing things?
No. You think that's clearly an intent on violence?
If they have a weapon,
like
hell yeah. Like if I'm in my home and somebody's broken in, that person's dying. I'm not gonna have a conversation with that guy. You're in my fucking house, right? I'm sneaking through with my fucking laser strobe light on my little alien Luago, and I'm gonna use that $5,000 pistol to unload all 17 rounds into you and your fucking friend. We're gonna have a conversation. My assumption is already that this is like the end game. You're gonna have a conversation with a person, right? That's a little bit just like on a personal level, I guess, but like I'm pretty sure you would say the same. That if somebody's broken into somebody's house and they're stealing things, we're already at the maximum level of escalation.
I disagree. I just do. I don't think violence is premeditated. Again, it depends on the scenario. If we use the scenario where you fully expect someone to not be home, right? That's not a premeditation of violence then to attempt to break into their home while they're not home. And then you end up you've already conceded the example where you could see where someone could have a weapon and use it even in the commission of crime and it would still be a legitimate
wait a second. When I say,
defense.
you keep saying I've conceded that point, and I didn't. I said at the very beginning that we could imagine some crimes where maybe it wouldn't happen. So for instance, you clip somebody's yard, okay? But we're very squarely in the area of we're doing a crime where we expect there to be some sort of resistance and we bring a weapon while committing that crime. I am saying that the intent is already automatically there to use the weapon in the commission of that crime, and that if it happens, the violence was essentially planned for, I would say. But you're saying that, no, it's not planned for. You could be trying to avoid violence and you'd have the weapon just in case. If the weapon is there just in case, it's just in case of what? The person protects himself from you committing a crime?
Yes.
So how is that not an intention to use the weapon to commit the crime?
Because, right, again, if George Floyd's passing fake money and he has a pocket knife on him, and then is that his intent to use that knife to commit that crime?
If the difference here is it would depend on how it works. Let's say that he uses fake money that's like obviously fake, and then the storekeeper like sees it, and the storekeeper goes to arrest him or something, and he like stabs the storekeeper on his way out or some shit, then I would say, yeah, what the fuck? You're using a knife to make sure that you're safe while committing your crime. It's harder to imagine this one because like you're giving something to somebody like walking away or whatever, as opposed to stealing something in a traditional way. Like, for instance, like if I were to scam you of $1,000 through PayPal, could you like, and I've got a knife on me in my computer room, am I like using my knife to commit the crime? Like, fake money,
right?
But if we make it a little bit more tangible, like shoplifting, yeah, if you're shoplifting and you've got a weapon on you, yeah, 100%, you're using that weapon with the intention to commit the crime, and you're using it to further the crime, 100%.
I even in that example, I mean, that's a better example than I completely disagree with that. Like,
if somebody has a knife or a gun on them and they shoplift, you don't think that they're using the knife or gun with the intention of furthering the crime?
No.
Okay.
If they have mace on them and they shoplift, that's probably, most women I know carry a little bit of pepper spray in their purse, right? So that would mean any woman that shoplifts is intending to commit violence because she has pepper spray in her purse?
Yeah, I would say that you have, the intent is basically there, yes. Because you're going to use that to defend yourself in the commission of the crime.
But that's not premeditated attempts to use violence.
Okay, so then going back to this then, so then what I said initially then is there's no such thing in your world. There is no premeditation to use violence except for on explicitly violent acts themselves. So like you have to be planning to assault somebody, planning to murder somebody, planning to use a weapon. But otherwise, a weapon that's used in the commission of another crime never counts as a plan for violence. It's just the other crimes.
I think that the plan to use violence to overthrow the government in that, like the Whiskey Rebellion, they created a militia, to fight against the federal government. That's enough at that point to say that they intended to use violence to achieve their goals. I think that, so maybe we're arguing much to do about nothing because you may end up saying that that's what January 6th was. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that there needs to be premeditation to be willing to use violence in your attempts to overthrow the government. I
Okay,
don't
well, in this
think
case, then, just curious then, and this isn't a kill shot argument to you, so you can concede this. You can say this, and it doesn't necessarily destroy everything to say it. But
Okay.
like in this case, shouldn't you never, if you were planning an insurrection, you would never say we're going to go here with the intent to use force. You would always just say, all right, guys, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go and overthrow the government today. Everybody come with me. Make sure you guys have your weapons just in case like a cop attacks us or something, okay? But everybody bring your weapons. We're going to go insurrect and overthrow the government. That wouldn't be an insurrection in your world because they weren't planning on using guns. They just brought them for self-defense.
No. I think that there are thresholds to this, and I think if they're legitimately saying that their attempt is to overthrow the government and they are bringing firearms in that example, I would say that would probably meet the threshold for insurrection.
Hold on. I'm going to write this down and tell me you get this. So you're saying if they were planning on overthrowing the government and they brought firearms with them, then that would exceed my threshold for using violence to commit an insurrection?
Yeah, I think that if they said, okay, boys, we're going to overthrow the government, bring your weapons, I think that would be, like, I guess it would determine what they mean by overthrow the government. But to me, to say it like that, first off, to go more to your example, I don't think anyone would talk like that. That would seem to be a really dumb thing to say. But at that point, when they're saying that, I think that entails the act of overthrowing the government entails sort of violence being necessary anyway. So the weapons there would be further example of that, even if they never said we intend specifically to use violence. That would be different than saying...
Sure, the only reason I'm asking this is because you had... So right now we're looking at the word planning as part of your definition.
Yes.
And you said planning violence, but then a counterexample you gave earlier is, well, you can open carry at a protest. That's totally fine.
Sure.
So what if they just said, we're going to go to try to like overthrow the government, but we're going to open carry on the way there? You're saying that would exceed your threshold for planning violence?
Well, to admit the overthrow of a government, I think, entails some sort of willingness to commit violence. It's part of the plan in the first place.
Why? You can have a bloodless coup or a bloodless insurrection, theoretically, right? Like, let's say you show up and everybody just, like, runs away, right? I mean, that might be, like, an atypical example, but...
Yeah, no, I don't think that's what people are meaning when they refer to the term insurrection. I think that they think that there has to be some sort of overthrow of the government and that violence has to be part of the planning of that. I think that's different than someone saying, and again, I know you don't want to hear this argument. I'm trying my best to engage in the analogy that I just think from the outset is not germane to what we're talking about, because that's different than saying we don't like something that happened. We don't like an election and we're going to protest that. And guys, we think Antifa is going to show up, or we think that that security is going to come fuck with us. So you have the right to defend yourself, et cetera, et cetera. We have to be ready that they could try to come after us. That's different than saying we're going to use violence to overthrow the government. We're going to use violence to get the political outcome that we want. Okay.
All right. I'll have these bolded and quoted points here, and maybe we'll come back to some you want. Okay. The next part of your definition was so you said a group of people planning a serious attempt to overthrow the government using violence. Okay. You have serious attempt. What qualifies in your mind as a serious attempt?
Okay, that's going to be the hardest part, because I think that this basically comes down to a threshold argument. So, for example, if 3 15-year-old graffiti people say, down with the system, fuck the man, let's put our black belt gear on, and we're going to go, kick some police cars because we want to bring down the man, I don't think that qualifies to the threshold of what we would consider colloquially to be an insurrection, even though it could be people that legitimately want the government to be taken down. Because I don't think that it rises to the level that it would be serious enough to say that there was any serious threat that would have any attempt at remote success in doing it. Now, if those same kids then...
Just as a real quick question, is there a difference in your mind between an insurrection and attempted insurrection, or like rebellion and attempted rebellion?
Yeah, I would say.
So is an insurrection only an insurrection?
I don't know what you mean. Of course there's a difference. Is there a difference legally? Is that your question?
Well, hold on. You say, of course there's a difference, but we won't go to my definition yet, but in my understanding, historically, there is no difference between, you would never say there's like an attempted insurrection or an attempted rebellion. People either rebel or they don't. If you attempt to rebel, you're rebelling. If you attempt to insurrect, you're insurrecting. So I'm just asking, in your mind, is there a difference between like an attempted insurrection versus an insurrection? And is the only difference between the two that an insurrection is successful, or that the attempted insurrection... Yeah, what's the difference, I guess, in your mind of the two?
It's a difficult question. I guess I haven't thought about it, right? So,
Sure.
let's just stick to the term insurrection. So, just thinking through this, so like maybe it would be an attempted insurrection if a bunch of people said we want to take down the government, but they're literally so incapable, like it's just a bunch of teenagers that there's no ability to do anything about it. Maybe that would be considered an attempted insurrection. But like if the planning phase of the insurrection reaches to the point where it would cross these threshold issues, then I think at that point there wouldn't really be a difference between an attempted insurrection versus insurrection, at least how we would apply it legally. So, for example, a failed insurrection is still an insurrection for all legal intents and purposes and sort of what we would consider colloquially.
Okay, what is so? So here's one question, and you can answer this either way, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't influence anything else, so it's not like a kill shot or anything. Okay, but like, is there any other crime ever where you would make the same consideration? Where like, let's say somebody was to attempt a crime, but the crime was so unlikely to work that we wouldn't even bother viewing it as a crime or charging them of the crime or even morally thinking they're culpable of committing the crime.
Yeah, there's probably like, I mean, I don't know. It has to do with sort of the idea of the planning phase of it and what we would mean. So, for example, if a bunch of kids say, let's steal from our teacher's, mailbox or some shit because we don't like them, and then they never get around to it, we probably wouldn't charge them with that theft. Right?
Well, because they haven't even done the thing. But let's say, for instance, okay, I'm going to use a crazy example, okay? And this is a crazy one, okay? I might even lose the audience, okay? But I would feel strong about this. I'm curious how a court would deal with this. Let's say that a couple of 18-year-olds are talking, and one guy, okay, they tell him, listen, all right, we've got this college professor, freshman, huge fucking dick, okay? Classes are way too hard. We actually found out that this guy has a severe allergy to Nerf darts, okay? That if you were to shoot like 3 Nerf dart things at this guy's face, you would actually kill this dude. 100% he would die. If a guy heard that and he went through a whole plan to buy a Nerf gun, get the Nerf darts, and then he would show up in class and shoot him like 15 times with those Nerf darts, I would say that that's attempted murder.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Even though he had no chance of succeeding because you're never killing somebody with Nerf darts.
Well, does this guy have a legitimate allergy to Nerf darts?
Well, no, I'm so sorry. No, that's part of the thing. I'm not aware of an analogy to Nerf darts.
I don't know then. I don't know if that's attempted murder. Like, it's clear in the colloquial sense that that guy is attempting to murder. Like, if he's in good faith believes this story and attempts to do that to kill him, yeah, I would say that that's clear. But would it rise to the legal definition? I'm not sure.
Well, hold on, no, wait. I'm just sticking with your kind of like moral, personal.
Yeah, I think personally, I would consider that was an attempt to kill that person.
Okay,
yeah,
but then wouldn't...
That's what I would say.
Sure, so then I'm trying to square this away with when you're saying that if too few people were to show up for something to rise to the level of a serious insurrection, like why would that matter? If the people themselves think they can do it, why would it matter if it was possible or not?
Because it has to reach a certain threshold before we would consider it an insurrection. Like, so when we get to your definition and the people that created your definition, it's going to be so overly broad that it's going to include thousands of things that no one would consider using common vernacular to be insurrections. And so when
hold on, we're running ahead. We're running ahead too far. Hold on.
I understand that.
That's part of... and I'm not even talking about my definition. I'm only on yours. You said a group of people planning a serious attempt. And it sounds like you're trying to define serious attempt as though it has to basically like succeed. Otherwise, you wouldn't consider it an insurrection. Or people that are just very misinformed or are bringing way too few people, you wouldn't consider it an insurrection. I'm just curious, like, what the line separating the two is.
Well, it's difficult, right? The serious attempt, it could be both in the level of violence that they are willing, so it has to be a serious level of violence. For example, 3 people using AR-15s aren't going to overthrow the government, but it could still be considered an insurrection if they decide to unload those firearms on members of Congress, because the serious level of the violence would rise to that level. Even though both me and you could probably agree, the chance of that actually overthrowing the government are slim to none.
So you wouldn't consider that. So even if they drew up huge plans and everything, you wouldn't consider that, and like say that was their plan. You would say, well, that's not an insurrection because the chances of them succeeding are very low.
No, I'm saying the opposite. Because of the serious level of violence carried out in doing that, I would probably consider that an insurrection.
Okay, 3 people with AR-15s would be, but 100,000 protesters or whatever wouldn't be.
Correct, because they're not pre-planning to use the violence to overthrow the government.
Well, no, wait. I'm not on the pre-planning part. I'm just on the serious attempt part.
No, I don't think that protest is a serious attempt to overthrow.
Okay. I'm just trying to
Like,
figure
do you
out
think,
why.
like,
Wait. I'm
no,
just, when you say serious attempt, I'm trying to figure out, like, because it seems like you're evaluating the attempt as the it's okay. When we're trying to define what we think is a crime, I'm pretty sure generally when we're looking at the our definitions here, all of this is being viewed prospectively, I think, not retrospectively. But it sounds like your serious attempt is only a retrospective analysis on how likely was it for this particular thing to have worked based on if it worked or not.
No, like, again, I think there's two levels of it. There's how likely would it have been to actually succeed in its effort to overthrow the government, but the serious also applies to the violence. And I think that matching either of those would be sufficient to call it an insurrection.
Okay, so then let's say
for
theoretically one guy walked in with wooden nunchucks, and he got through the security and everything, and he had one friend also who had wooden ninja stars. And let's say that these two guys captured Mike Pence, and they convinced Mike Pence to give the election to Donald Trump. Would you say that even though that was a successful insurrection, you wouldn't consider it an insurrection because it doesn't count as a serious attempt, because the chances of that succeeding are so unlikely? The violent means they brought wasn't even that much. They didn't bring enough people. So it was a successful insurrection that would have failed your definition of insurrection on the outset, or?
I guess at that point, there's questions as to whether or not them convincing Mike Pence to change his mind would have worked, because presumably...
No, I'm sorry. Let's assume that they change his mind to, like, literally delete, like, paper shred, something that would be clearly illegal. We don't have to fight over the electricity yet. But let's say that, like, we're going to tell Mike Pence to we brought black Crayola crayons, and he's going to rewrite all the electoral votes to convince everybody that it was fake. Something clearly illegal, right?
Okay, but in this analogy, we also have to assume then that Mike Pence never tells anyone that he was forced to do this. That's
Sure.
necessary for the
I'm just
analogy.
saying that, like, if there's an unlikely to succeed insurrection and it does succeed, then it feels like you would say that, well, that was an insurrection, but only because it worked. But if they would have gotten caught, we wouldn't consider it an attempted insurrection.
That is true. I think there are many, many problems with this analogy. But yes, is there a chance that there could be something that we would all look at and be like, that's a joke, it had no chance to succeed, but then hypothetically in some crazy fucking world it ends up succeeding when we say, oh, I was wrong. I didn't think based on the planning aspect of that. If you told me that two people with nunchucks were able to overthrow the government, I would say that's a fucking joke. Clearly that's not an insurrection. But it worked. So yeah, I guess it was an insurrection then. Yeah.
Okay, I guess my two issues are, so the two challenges that I would bring to this, and we don't have to fight as much on this. The two challenges I bring is, one, is it would go back to the one thing. Can you think of any sort of attempted crime that we would say wasn't the attempted crime because it just didn't have a high likelihood of working? Because I feel like any time you've got the mens rea, the criminal intent to commit a particular crime, even if it's unlikely to work, we would still say that person attempted this particular crime always.
But again, it would have... I don't know. I would have to think about it strongly.
Okay.
I'm sure I could come up with some sort of example, but I'll be honest with you. I can't off the top of my head think of an example that maybe as we go, I'll be able to think of something.
Sure, that's fine. Okay. And then my second question is, can you think in your mind ever of any failed insurrections? Because it sounds like, using your definition, basically the fact that an insurrection failed would basically automatically make it not an insurrection. Can you think of a single failed insurrection?
No, that's not true. I'm not saying that. Like, there can certainly be insurrections like, there have been insurrections that didn't result in the overthrow of the government, like the Whiskey Rebellion, the Chaz Zone.
Okay, wait. Okay, sorry. So in your mind, an attempted insurrection would be trying to overthrow the government, and it would only become an insurrection if it overthrows the government.
Well, again, for the purposes of legalese, I think that there's not probably much of a difference in how we would act on those. But yeah, I would say that in
because you gave Chaz and BLM as examples of failed insurrections. So would that make them?
Oh, no. I didn't say BLM. I said the Whiskey Rebellion and Chaz.
Whiskey Rebellion and Chaz. So you would say that these are failed insurrections. So that would make them. Would that make them just insurrections then? And then they failed, or would that make them attempted insurrections?
I would call them insurrections, but they're also I would say they're insurrections, but they failed.
Okay. So an insurrection that fails is still an insurrection. Okay. Let me think. Hold on. Let me just think if I have one more question on this. Okay. If an insurrection fails, it's still considered an insurrection. but the insurrection would have needed to have had a reasonable chance to succeed for it to fail and still be called an insurrection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, hold on. But in order for it to be called an insurrection, to be called a failed insurrection, it would have needed to have had a likely chance to succeed in the first place. Okay, then just curious, and I don't know the details of these, but we can read into these if you want. Why would you consider Chaz a failed insurrection then? Like, do you think that Chaz had a reasonable chance of peeling territory off from the state of Washington, the city of Seattle, or the United States of America?
Well, it did. It succeeded for a period of time, but it didn't achieve its ultimate goal of overthrowing in that particular area that level of government. But it did succeed for a matter of weeks, almost a month, right?
Chaz succeeded for a limited period of time in, but it succeeded in what?
And stealing land from the United States government, emancipating that area of the world from the U.S. government.
What does success count as here for you? I'm getting very pedantic. You don't have to have exact names. I'm just curious. Does success just mean that they've declared a thing and
they successfully kept out all authority, and it was an autonomous zone that they declared themselves separate from the government of, what was it, Seattle and presumably the United States then. Mm-hmm. Okay. Seattle feels part of.
Okay, Chaz succeeded for a limited period of time in stealing land from the United States government because they declared themselves separate and autonomous for a period of time. Okay.
Well, it's not just they declared themselves. It worked. They used violence. They kept police out. People were murdered there. Police had to ask them, and first responders had to ask their military, basically it was tantamount to their military security, for permission to enter, to treat people that were shot. So it wasn't just they attempted to keep them out. They did.
Nothing that you've described so far is like taking territory from the United States. All of this could literally just be like a violent event, though.
I would think that would fall into the overthrow the government portion.
Because the police need assistance in entering an area?
No, because they took over that part of the country with physical violence, removing all authority, and then setting up their own military.
Did they have their own military set up?
They had the security guys. They had security barriers set up with armed guards.
Security guys and security barriers is a far cry from their own military.
Well, define military.
Well, the onus is on you here because you said part of your definition is like a serious attempt.
When I'm saying military, I'm saying armed enforcers designed to keep out other countries' armed men.
Okay.
That's what I would qualify as. So it acted as both their police, their security, and their military. I don't know what the actual definition of the word military is, but that's how I'm using the term. That it was used to prevent outside governments from getting into
other countries. Oh, okay. Okay, we can roll with this. That's fine. Okay, for now. Okay, we've got a group of people planning a serious attempt. Okay, and then we've got to overthrow the government. What does overthrow the government mean to you?
I think that's another term that's difficult, right? So I think that it needs to mean that there is a level of severity in that as well. So it's not just protesting one law. It has to be something that takes away a portion of the government, such as their land, takes away the leadership or the people that lead, such as murdering people in positions of power.
Okay. So it takes away some portion of the government, such as land. Can you give me a few more things here? What do we mean by that?
So like if the South seceded, right?
Okay.
Took away land from the federal government, that would be an insurrection. Trying to take away a bunker, or a fort, that would be an insurrection. Need more examples or?
No, that's
forcing
fine.
The government out of your, forcing the government out from their ability to tax you using violence. That would be an overthrow of the government.
Okay. Okay, overthrow the government. Okay, and then we've got at the end, we've got using violence. What counts as violence to you?
I would say violent. Shit. Okay, a little pedantic. I would say violence is non-self-defense, physical aggression that results. I don't know. It can't just be physical aggression because
Sure.
I
Here,
can
wait,
just.
real quick. I'm gonna go pee, and you can think of this, okay? Also, keep in mind we
Okay.
can go back to this. You can change anything you want. I'm not trying to
Yeah, I mean.
capture you on anything here, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna use this real quick. 1 second.
Okay, no problem. As we wait for Destiny to come back, I think I have no problem going to. You can see sort of the ridiculous nature of. It's not ridiculous, but you can see how the interrogation of a definition, and you could understand why the broader point that someone that me is interested in is talking about the selective application of the term in order to demonize political opponents and use lawfare against them. You can see why this sort of debate is sort of uninterested when I think that that broader conversation of how this is playing out. However, I am someone who tries to debate in good faith, and I hope that it's obvious, even if people think that I'm full of shit and wrong, that I'm actually trying to go through analogies that I don't think really apply whatsoever, and trying my best faith effort to give what I think is my understanding and to be able to explain this stuff. And I understand a lot of people, particularly on my side of things, are going to say, this is a mistake. You shouldn't be going down this rabbit hole. I'm just trying to be fair. And I've agreed that for the first half of this conversation, I will do my best to allow any of these definitions to be interrogated to the maximum effort possible. So I have no problem doing this. I'm also admitting that I can't claim that this is some definition that I've written in stone. It's just the definition when I hear the term insurrection is the things that I normally think about. And I understand from the outset of it that there's going to be problems with a definition like this, because when we're talking about common vernacular, there's always going to be certain threshold things. And I'm admitting that. Like, what does serious mean? Well, it might mean different things to different people. But I think that that's what's going on. When I look, for example, at what I see is the riots of Black Lives Matter, there are all sorts of things that I think once we get to Destiny's definition that I think would qualify as insurrections. Most of the time, no one called those insurrections. And I think that proves that with the common vernacular that there's something more to it that we're not saying. Are you back, man? I'll stop rambling if you're back.
Oh yeah, can you hear me?
Okay. Yep.
Okay. Well, okay. So for using violence, you've got non-self-defense, physical aggression.
Here's the definition I looked up real quick. It says behavior or treatment in which physical force is exerted for the purpose of causing damage or injury. Sure, sounds good. Other than self-defense, I don't think that
Okay.
qualifies. You would agree with that as well, right? Like self-defense is, you could engage in violence, but it's morally legitimate if it's self-defense.
Sure.
So that's not the violence I'm saying in this definition. It would have to be.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm going to reread this and let's see if we're on the same page. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So Rob's definition of insurrection is a group of people planning a serious attempt to overthrow the government using violence. For group, you've got two or more people. For people, you defining this as like basically non-government actors and people that are either like U.S. citizens, residents, people who are generally here legally, right? For planning, you mean that they pre-planned a violent thing to overthrow the government. They have to plan to use violence. Just having weapons as self-defense isn't enough. You have a serious attempt, meaning that there has to be like a reasonable chance of this particular insurrection succeeding. You've got overthrowing the government, which means not just protesting a law, but taking away some portion of the government, such as land, forcing the government out from their ability to tax you, or taking a portion of their leadership away. And then you've got using violence, meaning it's behavior or treatment in which physical force is used to cause damage or injury.
Yeah, that sounds pretty reasonable.
Okay.
Now, you weren't here, but I am admitting this is literally just a definition I came up with on the top of my head. Which seems like bad form, but ever since you offered to talk about this, I've worked or been on vacation every day. So this is what I'm just being as honest as possible. When I hear someone say there was an insurrection, this is the God's honest off the top of my head what I would think. Like, oh,
Okay, yeah.
this is what I would think insurrection is.
That's
and I
fine.
think that matters because I think that there's a reason that we haven't really called anything an insurrection other than January 6th for a long, long time.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. Now, there's like 50...
But I don't mind the interrogation. That's fun.
So there's a ton of different arguments that I would use against this. Namely that the... Well, let me write. Hold on. So Stephen's issue with this definition is that, one, there is no historical or legal basis for this definition. I think you agree with that, right?
No. Here's why. What does historical or legal mean?
As in, if I look
Does
at
it
like
just
historical, when people are talking about insurrection, whether it's Congress or like law drafter, or that is Congress, whether it's Congress or whether it's like courts that are analyzing insurrection, that you're not citing or alluding to any of that.
No, that is true.
Yes,
You are correct about that. What I would say, though, is that I don't think that the only place that we could get that is through case law. Because case law is a place we could look at to see if there was a historical or legal basis. However, there are things in which cases are not brought, and which it seems that there could be that the definition isn't there in case law because it's changed or it's morphed, etc. And it is proven by the fact that what we used to think the definition was hasn't been charged or hasn't been brought up or in over 100 years.
So I agree with you there, but you haven't cited to any of that either, right? There are people that
That's
talk
true.
about passing laws, so conversations in Congress might be recorded, some of which I've cited for my debate against Andrew, but you're not citing to any of those as well. So you have no historical
true.
or legal basis for your definition.
No, let me be clear. I will say with legal basis, I'm pretty confident that there isn't any that speaks to this because it's way too vague for any sort of legal basis. You would agree with that? Like, no one's going to
I
write a
wouldn't
law.
agree with anything. No, I would not agree with that. In fact, the
You don't
highest
think
courts
that
of the land so far have all agreed with me, so I wouldn't agree with that. at all.
No. I'm not saying on the term. I'm saying my definition is too vague to ever be written in law. Like,
Probably,
you wouldn't
sure.
find. Yeah. Now, historical though, I'm not quite sure. Like, is it true that I could find some sort of historical book or text, from some author in 1830?
Sure,
that
you
agrees largely
could,
with it?
you could,
but I
but
didn't
wait,
do that.
Yeah,
if
you
that's
could.
what you're
Yeah,
asking.
sure. So there is no historical or legal basis, or I'll say legal foundation for your definition, right?
Correct. So I'm not saying that like, oh, I read Thomas Paine, in Rights of Man, and no, I'm not saying that.
Okay. I would say the second issue is that things in history that were commonly thought of as insurrections would easily fail under Rob's definition. Do you agree with that or no?
Like, give me an example.
So, like, for instance, I don't believe the Whiskey Rebellion would, in your mind, I don't think that would count as an insurrection at all. Those people
Why not?
never had a chance of ever overthrowing the government whatsoever. It was a bunch of, like, retarded farmers. No offense.
Well, but then I included in overthrow the government of like their ability to stop the government from being able to tax them.
Oh, okay.
Right.
You did include this, but at the beginning of our conversation. Also, none of these are gotchas. If you want to amend or change anything, you can. I'm not trying to trap you.
that's fair.
Sure. So in the beginning of the argument, I deleted this quote because I thought you'd change your mind on it. In the beginning of the argument, it sounded like you said an insurrection has to be an attempt to overthrow the government. It can't just be resisting a particular law.
Correct.
So
like,
why
for
does
example,
taxation count here?
Because the government, it's a fundamental duty of the government to be able to tax people, and saying
In
that the federal
18
government.
or 1780 or whatever?
Well, yeah, that's sort of what now listen, I'm no great student of history. I'm just
Sure.
some redneck that works in home healthcare, but my understanding of the Whiskey Rebellion was basically a bunch of people in Pennsylvania were pissed that there was going to be like a federal excise tax on their whiskey, correct?
Not just and again, my history is not great either, but we can read this. But I don't believe that it wasn't that it was a federal excise tax. It was the first tax. So the idea that the federal government even had a right to tax you, now we take that for
Right.
granted. But back then, that would have been that was a really big deal. Like,
Sure.
why?
Absolutely. That's why I'm saying it's different, right? So they're saying that foundationally, the federal government doesn't have the right to tax them. So they're overthrowing that portion of the government that says it is a fundamental right, like a government can tax you. They say no.
Okay, if you
No,
want to
it
go with
can't.
that, that's fine. But I think I would tell you have to walk back your entire part about overthrowing the government, and you have to come on board with me saying resist a law. Because
No, I disagree.
you're nothing. Hold on, because there is no person that would agree that resisting taxation is the equivalent of overthrowing the government. You're
I
not.
disagree. I disagree. I think that I think that you have a criticism that's legitimate, that there is a threshold problem with what I'm saying here. That's absolutely true. And it's going to be hard for me to pinpoint down exactly what I mean. Granted, I'll give you that. But I think that there is a clear bright line that we could see that something saying like, no, the federal government doesn't have the right to issue taxes is different than saying my local meter maid or, the local mail truck doesn't have the right to deliver mail to my neighbor's house or to deliver mail to my house, or that I'll give you an example, something that's happening in my area.
Well, hold on, wait. I'm curious. I'll push. Why wouldn't resisting U.S. mail, U.S. certified mail could be a way that you deliver like a court summons to somebody? Or what about resisting like police officers arresting you? Like, would that count as an insurrection? Like, what? Because it sounds like overthrow the government here. It has just become resisting a law.
I don't think that preventing police officers from arresting you would qualify as an insurrection, because that's not an attempt to overthrow the government, right?
Well, no, wait. Hold on. You can't use that word anymore. Overthrow the government, because you said that resisting taxation, that's not overthrowing the government. You agree with that, right?
It's overthrowing a core action of the government, a foundational principle.
You understand that a foundational principle of the government is the executive branch, which is to enforce laws, which includes police officers. So a core action of the government is the enforcement of law way more than taxation. So resisting police.
I think that, again, it's different on a threshold argument. I think that the core action, while you are right that the executive branch has the ability to enforce the law, I don't think you being pissed off that cops are coming to arrest your uncle because he was having a kegger is the same as saying we are going to pick up rifles and create a militia to stop the federal government's ability to have taxes.
What if you created a militia to stop the cops from arresting your uncle?
No, it's not an insurrection. It has nothing to do with overthrowing the government. It's maybe something that I'll eventually need to amend in my definition, that one of the things that I think in the definition you'll use is the term of public purpose.
No, wait, don't jump ahead. Okay.
But it's not jumping ahead. It's making I'm saying that maybe it's something I'll eventually have to amend in my definition, which is that there seems to be overthrowing the government seems to entail sort of things that the government has the ability to do to you that's foundational to their existence, not just interrupting with law enforcement.
Wait, you're saying words foundational to its existence. You understand the government doesn't exist without law enforcement, right? It's literally one of our three branches. It's more. Do you agree that the executive branch is more important than taxation?
Well, that's sort of a weird qualifying question. I don't know.
You don't know if the branch that enforces the law, like with no executive branch, the legislative branch doesn't matter, and with no legislative branch, the judiciary has nothing to adjudicate. So you have no government. If you don't have an executor of laws, you have nothing. You have no government. The government can't exist with only two branches.
I would say hypothetically, if there was zero executive branch, if there is no enforcement whatsoever, yes, that's a bigger deal than the government isn't allowed to tax you. However, I think that there is a clear threshold argument. So, for example, would be the difference of saying, we don't think that police can exist, therefore we will create a militia to fight all police to stop police from existing, is different from saying we're going to stop the cops from arresting our neighbor.
Well, hold on. To be clear, the Whiskey Rebellion wasn't them trying to stop all taxation from happening. I think they were just resisting whenever the tax collector was showing up to their area to collect taxes for the whiskey bullshit or whatever. It was not like they were trying to get rid of all taxation in the government.
Be careful. You're going to talk yourself out of thinking it was an insurrection under your definition, because it has to have
Wait, we're not even at my definition.
I understand. What I'm saying is that there was a public purpose, that they were criticizing the federal government's ability to levy taxes.
Yeah, but hold on. Resisting the cops would be criticizing the government's ability to enforce laws, no?
No. It's a different standard, because one is a foundational ability, a core ability of what the government could do. The other is stopping police from doing things that have nothing to do with your attempt to overthrow the government. So, for example, I'm not saying, when I say overthrowing the government, it does not meet the definition of overthrow the government that I'm trying to stop this cop from arresting me right now. And you say,
no, wait, you're not talking about stopping a cop from arresting me right now. I'm talking about if you form a militia to stop cops from arresting your uncle versus forming a militia to stop cops from taxing your uncle, you're saying one is clearly an insurrection and another is clearly not an insurrection.
I'm not saying it's clearly an insurrection. I'm saying it probably is an insurrection.
Okay, even
I'm saying
probably
that-
one or the other. There's like no, but in my mind, I'll ignore the fact that all of this is, I would say, a little absurd. If anything, I would say that the police and the execution of law is far more fundamental to government than taxation. We can imagine a world with no taxation. It would be weird. Maybe the government would have to like produce and sell products, or maybe they would raise money through donations. It'd be weird. But you literally cannot imagine a government with no executor. You can't, because
I just want to be clear. We're not going to your definition. Just for right now, I want to be clear. You're saying that it is a more obvious attempt to overthrow the government to stop police from arresting a relative of yours than it would be to stop the federal government's ability to tax people.
under your
That's your
under
argument.
your definition of overthrow the government, yes.
Why under my definition? Like in general, you would say one of those. You would say based on your definition of overthrow the government, however you want to define it. Based on that, you would say yes, it is a more obvious attempt to overthrow the government to prevent police from arresting a relative of yours than to try to stop their ability using violence to tax.
Well, no, in my world, I would say that the resisting the cops part, I would call that most likely obstruction of justice, right? You would get arrested. That's a crime. Resisting the government's ability to levy taxes, to resist like one of the like fundamental purposes of a government to carry out something like that, I would say that in my mind that would probably be an insurrection. Yeah, you're
Okay,
fighting
that's
against
exactly the argument I'm making. The exact same argument that I'm making.
No, hold on. You can't.
One is obstruction
you can't
of
borrow.
justice,
Wait. You
the
can't
other-
borrow any of my definitions because we're working completely in your world. You can't go to mine when it's convenient for you.
No. Then okay. Then